This is Venezuela in the year 2000. It has functioning markets. People work here. People can buy food. All in all, not a bad place to live. This is Venezuela today. There's no food, the money is worthless, people are dying in the streets, and the government won't even let citizens leave. What happened? How did an entire country go from one of the most prosperous in Latin America to a desperate wreck in less than 2 decades? To understand this, we're going to look at how deadly ideas, combined with a lust for power, drew Venezuela down into a swirling cesspool of violence, chaos, and death. The story of Venezuela's downfall really starts with one man, Hugo Chávez. Through a combination of charisma, brute force, and a poisonous ideology, Chávez almost single-handedly drove his country to ruin. From his humble beginnings in the Venezuelan military, Chávez always harbored ambitions of power. In 1992, he even attempted a military coup against the government. He failed and was sent to prison for his crimes. In a forced apology, Chávez defiantly noted that his revolution was over, for now.
Compañeros, lamentablemente, por ahora, los objetivos que nos planteamos no fueron logrados en la ciudad capital. Es decir, nosotros acá en Caracas no logramos controlar el poder. Nuevas situaciones y el país tiene que enrumbarse definitivamente hacia un destino mejor.
Chávez used his solitude to do a lot of reading and soul-searching. But where some people find religion or philosophy, Chávez found Marx. Was he a true believer? It's hard to say, but his inner demagogue saw the potential to use Marx's rhetoric about the downtrodden proletariat as a way to consolidate his power.
Personas piensan que inicialmente el presidente Hugo Chávez no tenía una propuesta socialista, pero solamente basta leer las ideas fundamentales para la Quinta República, que era el documento que Hugo Chávez había elaborado en 1999 para la nueva Constitución.
When he got out of prison, he began to campaign for political office, this time using words and ideas instead of guns. In the 1990s, a lot of Venezuelans were feeling anxious. An oil boom had promised wealth and prosperity for all, but many migrants from rural villages had yet to find the economic opportunities they'd hoped for. At the same time, a two-party duopoly had emerged, agreeing to trade off power every election cycle, entrenching the political class.
Si hay países como los Estados Unidos de América, donde el rule of law o el Estado de Derecho es importante, en Venezuela, como muchos países de América Latina, la democracia ha sido más importante que el rule of law y el Estado de Derecho, con lo cual la mayoría de los venezolanos creen que básicamente el rol del Estado debe ser el de proveer derechos sociales, olvidándose de que los derechos individuales son lo más importante, con lo cual la revolución socialista que existe en Venezuela, la revolución marxista que hoy existe en Venezuela, ha tenido un camino mucho más fácil, puesto que sencillamente lo que apela es a las emociones de los venezolanos.
Tierra y título, pero nada de crédito, ni de apoyo técnico. Bueno, ¿y qué pasó con los campesinos? No llegó al campesino los beneficios del petróleo y de la riqueza nacional. Pues bien, eso ahora no puede ocurrir de nuevo, y ese es uno de los principios.
A lot of people felt left behind, like the government was only for the rich and connected, and not for them. Chávez exploited these feelings with promises of worker equality. In 1998, he was elected president in a landslide.
El proyecto del neoliberalismo salvaje, que hay una mano invisible, el mercado que todo lo arregla. Mentira, mentira, 1000 veces mentira.
It didn't take long for Chávez to grow frustrated with the limits on his power. Venezuela still had a constitution, and its checks and balances limited the power of aspiring dictators. Undaunted, Chávez traded on his popularity and charisma to rewrite the rules. In 1999, he called a nationwide referendum that allowed him to alter the Constitution, expanding his power in the process. Now he had unchecked authority to impose his socialist vision.
Porque estoy cansado de que este hombre esté gobernando y esté destruyendo el país con hambre y miseria. Y estoy cansado de que este hombre esté al lado de los terroristas y que nos esté apabullando y dándole el abrazo a Fidel Castro. No queremos comunismo en nuestro país. Queremos libertad, queremos democracia. ¡Abajo, Chávez!
Hugo Chávez sostuvo la idea de que para inaugurar una nueva etapa política en Venezuela era necesario cambiar la Constitución. Y a través de una interpretación completamente errónea y contraria a la Constitución de 1961, se permitió una Asamblea Nacional Constituyente que abolió todos los poderes públicos y redactó una nueva Constitución al margen de la Constitución del 61. Eso fue sencillamente un golpe de Estado.
By 2006, Chávez invoked the language of Marxism.
Revolucionario lo que está es distribuyendo la riqueza entre todos para que todos vivamos mejor, porque la riqueza de Venezuela es de todos, no de una minoría.
Openly admitting wanting the unchecked powers of a dictatorship. But it would be a dictatorship of the people. The government began to seize control of one industry after another. Marxist socialism taught Chávez that central planning would work better. Conveniently, total control of the economic means of production only reinforced his unlimited, unstoppable power. Now he would decide winners and losers, and he was very good at rewarding his political cronies. Chávez used the revenue from Venezuela's oil fields to buy popular support through generous welfare programs. And for a while, it seemed to work. The oil money paid for health care, provided you were well connected enough to find a doctor. It paid for education, and free schools taught children to love their president. But like all government promises, these required more and more money to feed the vote-buying machine. So Chávez's government diverted more and more of the country's industry towards the production of oil. Pretty soon, the nationalized oil industry crowded out private enterprise almost completely. But the global price of oil was high, and oil was in high demand. What could go wrong?
Closing numbers on the markets today. At one point, the market fell as if down a well, over 700 points.
Apple shares were just getting hammered this morning.
We're down by between 3 and 4.5% generally across these markets. What in the world is happening on Wall Street?
Starting in 2007, the world entered a global economic crisis, and the price of oil plummeted. Suddenly, all of Venezuela's wealth disappeared, and all of the goods citizens had been importing from neighbor countries, goods like food and clothing, were no longer affordable. When Nicolás Maduro, a loyal Chavista, took over after Chávez's death, he inherited an economic basket case. But instead of implementing reforms to restore functioning markets, Maduro doubled down on socialism.
Modelo económico, social y político que trascienda el capitalismo, que supera el capitalismo con todos sus males. ¿Cuál es la verdadera línea y la ruta de transición económica al socialismo? ¿Cuáles son los modelos productivos socialistas en el campo industrial, en el campo tecnológico, en el campo agroindustrial, en el campo financiero? En todos los campos de la dimensión económica.
What did the government do when it suddenly ran out of the cash it needed to buy political stability? Maduro's cronies simply printed more money. Lots of it. Expanding money and credit is a favorite trick of bankrupt governments. But it's the economic equivalent of giving a junkie another hit. It feels good, but it only makes things worse. Inflation is the ultimate tax on the poor, as money in their pockets becomes increasingly worthless. 20,000 Bolivar notes are worth less than $6 US, and inflation rates are in the triple digits with no end in sight. When things started to spin out of control, why didn't the government reverse course? One reason is the toxic ideology of socialism. One of Maduro's top advisors is Alfredo Serrano, a Marxist intellectual from Spain. Maduro calls him the Jesus Christ of economics. Think about that for a minute. With the presumption of omnipotence, Why wouldn't they just ignore the warning signs of the calamity to come? Serrano is the one who convinced Maduro that Venezuelans were starving because of too little government control, not too much. He's also the guy who came up with the heartless idea of keeping citizens imprisoned in the country, preventing them from crossing the border into Colombia to buy groceries for their families. All of this has made the current situation in Venezuela feel like an episode of The Walking Dead, but this is not fiction. We read horrific stories in the news every day. One man was caught stealing the equivalent of $5 out of desperation. For this petty crime, an angry mob slashed him, doused him in gasoline, and set him on fire. The state-run mental hospitals, out of money and out of medicine, have become terrifying torture chambers, with patients strapped to beds and left to die. The devastation wrought by socialism has turned people into animals, and animals into a starving public's last resort for food. Dogs, cats, and even rats are being hunted in the streets by moms desperate for something, anything, to feed their children. The food situation has become truly desperate. In 2016, 90% of Venezuelans said they didn't earn enough money to adequately feed themselves, and over the course of that year, a majority of citizens lost significant amounts of weight. Meanwhile, Venezuela has become a full-blown police state. In 2016, 28,000 Venezuelans died due to violence, with 5,000 of those attributed to resisting authority. That puts a chance of dying a violent death at almost 1 in 1,000, an unbelievable number for any country that's not an active war zone. Law enforcement has become largely unofficial, with most of Maduro's dirty work handled by colectivos, essentially vigilante thugs who claim a devotion to revolutionary socialism. This allows the official police to distance themselves from violence, while protesters and dissidents are still treated cruelly. Those who are critical of the socialist government's policies are made to disappear. You would think that the legacy of Hugo Chávez, the death and poverty that is occurring under the socialist government he helped build, would be obvious. A brutal dictator who starved and oppressed his own people for the sake of power. But not everybody sees it this way. Former President Jimmy Carter mourned Chávez's death, crediting him with improving the lives of millions. Filmmaker Michael Moore praised Chávez for using oil money to provide free health care and education, ignoring the food shortages and the civil liberty violations. They weren't alone. Other celebrities were taken in by Venezuelan propaganda. What the hell does it matter with these people? Why can't they see that socialism in practice is a humanitarian disaster, a deadly ism where the lives of people are callously sacrificed on the altar of authoritarianism, sacrificed to a cause that degrades the well-being of each of us as individuals.
Muchas personas han creído por mucho tiempo en Venezuela que todo se resume a un tema democrático, de elección, de la opinión del pueblo, del voto mayoritario, olvidándose de que lo más importante es un sistema de rule of law o de Estado de Derecho. Formalmente ya no solo es una república socialista al margen de la Constitución del 99, sino que también formalmente es un país en cuyos valores e ideales de Estado de Derecho y de democracia ya no existen, ya no aplican. Y esto es interesante además por quizás otro factor. Muchas personas piensan que la salida de la situación política, económica y social en Venezuela pasa por una nueva elección. Sin embargo, solamente se pueden dar elecciones en países con sistemas de libertad, donde la gente pueda votar con libertad de pensamiento, libertad de expresión, libertad de asociación. Y tales cuestiones, es decir, derechos individuales, no existen en Venezuela.
Let's hope that the people of Venezuela successfully rise up and reject every vestige of Chavismo from their country. The lesson for the rest of us is simple. When governments centralize power and attempt to redesign economic life from the top down, things never turn out as promised. Socialism kills.